Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Privileged to anchor this panel. I'm not a great speaker. I thought I'll take the help of ChatGPT, and I told ChatGPT to write a set of opening comments for me, and the response was that I'll write it for you, but don't blame me if it sounds too robotic, right? So Gen AI itself is telling us to not ignore the human factor, and I think to that extent, the biggest contribution so far of Gen AI is that it has gotten rid of a lot of confusion. You know, many of us used to keep thinking of, are we Gen Z, Gen X, Gen Y? Now we all know we are all Gen AI, okay? So, so that confusion is gone. And without further ado, I'll kind of get into some questions, and let's see whom should I pick on first. So RB, tell us, in banking, is something real happening, or are you just talking about stuff?
Honestly, we are just talking.
Okay, so tell us a bit about the big talk.
So we actually talk about a lot of things. One is the number of POCs which are going on. And, you know, it's a highly regulated environment for us. And everything has to be justified for us to do anything. So there are a lot of things which are happening. I would say more than 150 different POCs are going across technology and analytics. But I would say one of the things which caught my attention for a while is the conversational BI. A lot of you might have heard, because in the back end you will have a lot of data, but can you ask a question and get the answer without actually going to the reports and finding those? So that's one of the things which we did. And over and above this, because there is no Gen AI in this, but it's basically how you put all the data behind, so that when you actually ask a question, it actually gives you the right answer with all the graphs and metrics which you need. So for us, that's not a challenge. But when any of the metrics which go beyond, which is out of the range, or say, for example, if the sales figure falls down, then can it trigger a lot of analytics, which is mostly Gen AI, not looking at only some database, but also looking at huge other databases which we have, which is all internal to us. We can look at the finance data, we can look at ad data, we can look at some of the other things which we did on marketing or any of this, and come up with something which actually says, okay, you know what, your sales went down, and these are the reasons, and it triggers all this, and before you ask any question, it comes up with a set of answers which you can delve in. Usually what we do is we are very reactive. We look at some of the metrics and then say, okay, what should we do? Do all the analysis and come back and say, okay, this is what has happened. But can we now do something where totally it is there before it happens? People know that, okay, these are the areas which we need to go in. So that's something which has caught my mind a bit, because there are a lot of different things which can happen. And as you fine tune, sometimes I feel that most of us might not be required. So that's one. And I thought this was very big, actually, if I go forward. Because when I started my career 30 years back, somebody was telling me this, saying that, you know, you guys can be replaced by a machine. And I was wondering whether I did the right choice by joining this. But today, if I look back and say that, okay, it has taken 30, 35 years, even we are still thinking about it, but it has not happened. So hopefully, in my kids' generation, it will happen. But I feel that, okay, this is the way to go with some of the use cases which we can look at for all the industries across.
Thanks, RB. Great to see that you are focused on use cases which impact the customer experience. And often what happens is, you know, we start implementing tech for the sake of tech without really focusing on what the impact is going to be. So good to see the focus on customer experience. And talking about replacing machines, sometimes I feel that we have become machines the way we have been working year after year. But Somak, banking is a regulated industry. So is it a convenient excuse all the time to blame everything on regulation? Or, you know, how do you manage, what are the constraints in banking that you are able to deal with?
Thank you. And I think perfect segue. So RB gave me a hint, which is so important. We are all in this panel and in this room. We are all humans who are in the business of helping humans. And that's very important. And humans are going to stay. and which means that machines, although they are taking control, but need to be governed. And that's especially in the BFSI industry and any other industry in the panelist. It's very important. So 3 things that I would pass it on to this audience is, I think, in the space of governance, I think, please keep in mind that the outputs that you generate are bias-free. So we need to keep that in mind as we are running our machines and churning out these large language models or small language models. Bias-free is very important. The second aspect is, we have all spoken about hallucinations, so that cannot be kept out as we give power to these machines. Hallucination-free is extremely important. And finally, humans do not like outputs which they cannot explain. So explainability is the critical, most critical factor, that the outputs that get churned, please make sure that they are explainable to you first. So I would say this industry will survive with humans, and humans are needed in this loop as we adopt Gen AI.
That's a relief, Somak, but you're absolutely right. Explainability is so critical, and I remember in the good old days in India, when I was with Citibank, when we rejected a loan application, we never gave a reason. We used to just simply say that the credit committee has rejected your loan application. Okay, no longer can you get away with that. You have to be able to explain, even if it's a model. And the big risk that you run is that if there is bias in the data, the algorithm will call it out, and it can create some sticky situations like what Goldman Sachs had some time back, where a husband and wife who used to file their returns together, they both applied for an Apple card, and they both got different credit limits. So, hard for machines to explain some of these things. So switching gears, I'll come to you, Nithya. Retail, FMCG products. So tell us how Gen AI is improving the cornflakes that we eat. Or are there other ways that your industry is using Gen AI?
Yes, of course. How it is improving is definitely in terms of variety and taste, and it's quite obvious that now it is more chocolatey and multigrain and this and that, and you have got 20 odd flavors of Pringles. I mean, you can't eat more than a couple of them, but I think there are 20. Right? So, these are the places, right, of course, in general, from a product innovation perspective, right, where we can get as close to the consumer preferences as possible. And in order to do that, right, Gen AI has been a game changer in order for us to synthesize and find what the consumer wants, right? What are the right kind of segmenting the consumers, right? And what is the right market parameters we need to focus on, and how do we kind of improvise on that, right? So in innovation, Gen AI has been extremely, useful. Another area where it's been useful is kind of in our consumer centricity, right? We talk about customers and we also talk about consumers, right? Most of the time from a P&L finance perspective, we stop at the customers, right? As long as we are able to kind of have a huge NSV growth, net sold volume, right? That's kind of, revenue growth, and then we are able to hit our bottom line, we are fine. But then at some point in time, we must realize that consumer is the king, right? And that is a paradigm which has been true even before Gen AI. So, in areas of how we capture the fantasy of the consumers through creative marketing, right? And here Gen AI has been super, super useful, because no longer we have to kind of sign up expensive contracts with all beautiful looking models, right? We can have Gen AI generate models based on our parameter. We can adjust the background. We need not take these models to costly locations in the world. We just adjust the background, right? So marketing has been a huge success, given the capabilities of generative AI to design novel, creative artifacts. Another one. I'm just thinking aloud, it could be what we are doing right now is kind of, we are having a co-pilot for all our teams. Now, we are in a co-pilot world, right? Microsoft calls it as a co-pilot company, right? And so we are planning to design co-pilot for everything: sales, marketing, finance, customer success. So basically, these would be kind of chatbot applications that we are developing that would look at all the internal corporate enterprise data, be it in each of these domains, and then be kind of ready assistants or AI assistants for people who need quick answer, which means that all our Tableau, Power BI, etc., reports are going to be a thing of past once we are having these co-pilots as kind of ready AI assistants. Another one is, which is something which has been already, I mean, what I'm talking about is these are all, right now in a POC to production phase. But, there another area where we have already started realizing benefits is productivity improvements in terms of GitHub Copilot and, code assistance and everything, right? So these are some of the classic use cases that we are embarking on. And there are many more things that we are still doing in POC, like retail, store execution, right? Digital shelf, and then things like that. So net, it's an exciting world in CPG, and I'm sure in retail also, talk about virtual trials, right? And then hyper personalization of the SKUs, or say you want to buy a purse which suits one of your dresses, right? You just upload these images, and then you have a hyper personalized design of a purse, right? Of course, you got to pay a premium for it, but it is possible. So I think there is even more in the retail space. Yeah, absolutely, right? Art of possible.
Very insightful, Nithya. I think that was a very intriguing array of use cases. Goes to show how Gen AI would impact almost every facet of work that we do, regardless of which industry we are in. I think what you spoke about is applicable in multiple industries. I'll come to you, Kaushik. Retail doesn't have a regulator the way banks have. So what are your excuses for not doing Gen AI at scale?
First of all, it feels great to be Gen AI, and especially in a post-lunch session, which is difficult for both the players and the audience. I think we are doing good at this point, so thank you. I think, look, along with Gen AI, I'll bring in the lens of GCC, because that's what the element here is. And when we look at a GCC, we have the abundance of skill, expertise, knowledge, and we want to do a lot because we know what's happening all around. But I think in my lens, and I would not call it challenge or excuses, but probably more as the aspects that we got to navigate. And one is the strategic alignment, right? From a GCC perspective, we want to do so many things which are shiny and out there. But I think what's really important is where it goes and impacts and helps the global organization to reach their goal. I think that's one of the main and primary factors. The second is, again, given the retail lens I have, it's a gold mine like any other areas like we speak about. But identifying the right use case and making sure that it's aligned to the strategy, but also we have the right data available. If we look at the big retailers who have been there for a good amount of time, there are tons of legacy systems that has built their structure. So the tech usually would be either more skewed on the legacy or a combination of legacy and transformative tech, right? Now, how do we navigate that and make sure that we have the right amount of data? If I want to do something on the supply chain, route optimizations, do I really have the right data so that we can go and implement it? So I think, strategic alignment, having the right data, the right tech stack are important aspects to navigate, but most important, I feel, is change management, both internally and externally. Internally, across all the collaborators, global stakeholders, teams, because when you're working on a Gen AI, starting with a POC to production, it's usually has to be a more collaborative approach. Change management, having everybody on your side is very important. The sponsorship from the home office, and yes, we got to go ahead with it, bring in all the resources, bring in all that you have, go through the iterations. I think that internal change management collaboration is important. And externally, I think it goes and directly hits our customer experience. So giving the customers belief on the transparency and the trustability of the outcome, that's also pretty important.
Amazing. So once again, a lot of focus on customer experience, and regardless to say this is going to change the way things happen, so change management becomes very critical. Quickly over to you, Swati. You are from the Tata AI business. How do you go about evaluating or prioritizing the Gen AI use cases? There is 50 different things that can be done. How do you determine what to do, what not to do?
Very good question, Sandeep. Thanks for that. देखो एक simple ground rule है, किसी का काम करने का तरीका आसान हो जाना चाहिए. We call it EODB in our own parlance, ease of doing business. फिर चाहे वो customers ease of doing business with us है या उसका experience है, or it is us managing our own processes. The examples just we heard from RJ about customer servicing, or from a marketing perspective, or from creating repositories to all the use cases, ease of doing business to a given stakeholder. Am I simplifying anything? Am I enhancing anything? Am I making things better? That's the first ground principle. So किसी का जीवन आसान हो जाना चाहिए. That's the first thing. Second, of course, is whatever use case are you picking up in the organization, do you have the kind of data that you would need to do it? Some are very non-conflicting, things like content created, right? That's much easier too, because you will not have hallucinations, as we just heard from Shaunak, right? Easier to manage that. And therefore, use cases where you either have adequate data, or you can manage the data quality with external enrichment, or the data dissonance can be managed, is the second important principle. Otherwise, everything else will fail. Third and most important, of course, and everybody will be questioned when we are doing these use cases in our own boardroom meetings, it may not be a short term, but it has to have a long-term impact of the change it brings about. It could be top line, it could be bottom line. It may not always be a number to add to. It could be an NPS promoter score. It could be an experience. There has to be a shift in one of the metrics that you're trying to drive. It may not be immediately quantifiable as a big number, but it is meaningful to the organization. So these are the three big things that at least, we would want to advocate are important before we pick up a use case.
Thank you very much. Resonates with my past experience while working for Tesco. We used to have a mantra, we used to call it better, simpler, cheaper. So anything that we did in Tesco had to make things better for the customer, simpler for the employees, and cheaper for the organization. And as we move forward, I'll now spring a surprise on the audience. I will call on stage another speaker, Anuj from KPMG. Anuj, if you could come here. So far, most of us were from the business and GCC world. And now I would like to bring in Anuj. Anuj is from KPMG, and he leads the analytics practice particularly for CPG. And what I would like to ask Anuj is, how is it that you are being called upon by the GCCs? What are those areas where GCC needs the help of providers like KPMG?
Thank you so much, Sandeep. And, in terms of surprise, this was by design that consultants always have to chase clients. So I was the last one to come in. But I think broadly, three areas where we see. One is for clients to even how do we get started on that journey? Right? So we all spoke about what are the use cases we should be focusing on, but more importantly, which use cases are giving us the maximum value, where we are seeing a lot of success. Right? That is one aspect. Very important aspect, as some of you mentioned, my fellow panelists mentioned, is educating the business. Right? How can they make distinction between what is traditional AI as well as what is really generative AI? Right? So this is the first aspect. The second is, how do we accelerate the time to deployment? Right? Whether we use a platform approach through agentic workflows, or how do we get the right business case in front of the headquarters as well as the different functions that we are targeting. And the third and very, very critical one is, how, now that I've started my journey, how do I govern AI? How do I have the right balance between democratization and governance, and having the right principles so that I can have responsible AI, I can have the explainability, as so mentioned. So these are the three areas where we're seeing clients come.
Thank you very much. With that, we kind of are running out of time, so coming to an end. But I think what is very clear is that we are at a very, very massive change of scale. I think if you talk about change started in the corporate world when first functional areas got automated. So people automated their sales force or their payroll or their supply chain. And then we moved to the era of ERP, where all these functions had to talk to each other. And then we moved to the era where all these systems started getting exposed to the customer over the internet. And now finally we are at a stage where not just within the organization, but organizations amongst each other have to collaborate. So the entire ecosystem of service providers like KPMG, GCCs, the business, all of us have to collaborate together if we really want to fully exploit and manage this change in a manner which is going to be impactful for our daily lives. So with that, thank you very much, dear panel. Hope all of you enjoyed the session as much as I did. Thank you very much for being a patient audience. Thank you.
Thank you so much.